We've got Kim Meyer, who's a Global Business Development Manager at Cigna. We've got Toby Nord, who's Director of Carlson Ventures Enterprise at the Carlson School of Management. I'm glad I got my diploma before he showed up. Greg Hayes, who's the Technical Director at Industrial Applied Science at Valspar. And we have Paul Saarinen. Did I get it close enough? I should have asked you beforehand, Paul. United Healthcare Growth Hacker. I want to hear what Growth Hacker means. And co-founder and CEO of Minome, I believe. We're going to give each of our panelists a couple minutes to do a commercial for themselves and their respective firms. And since Paul's actually looking at me, he gets to go first. So go ahead, Paul.
Thanks, guys, for coming today. Really appreciate it. And thanks for the invitation, Rick. Really quickly, I know we can get into growth hacking maybe later because it's a longer discussion. But about 7 years ago, I started down this path when my youngest daughter was born with a heart defect. She was in heart failure at 48 hours old. Led to a 4-month-long stay in the hospital. My wife and I spent every single day with her. From that experience, we decided, my wife and I, that we were going to be all in on helping make changes or helping find solutions to the problems that we ran into with our health experience. My wife decided to put together a nonprofit really quickly. The work the nonprofit has done has resulted in 10 million babies being screened for heart defects in the U.S. alone this year. Unbelievable. And China will now be rolling this out as a national standard of care because of her work as well. So you can probably think, I think it's about 16 million more every year. So we're talking large numbers here. My background, I've had a couple startups. The last one, a genetics startup, which I'm more than happy to share about later. Today, I work at Optum as a growth hacker, which is a fancy word for marketing in a startup, right? We use a lot of different techniques, but I work with intrapreneurs every day. We have 8 of them, and I manage a portfolio from a marketing perspective. Nice to meet you all.
I'm Toby Nord. This microphone is really intimidating. It's the biggest microphone on the planet. I teach at the Carlson School. My main job is to teach entrepreneurship. I've been doing it for 10 years. I'm not a PhD. I'm not a researcher. I'm a practitioner. The way I teach it in the program I run called the Carlson Ventures Enterprise, we teach entrepreneurship through experiential learning. So I've probably done in the last 10 years about 250 projects for entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs. So ranging from back-of-the-napkin startups all the way to the development or innovation divisions of some of our better-known Fortune 500 companies. My experience before Carlson School was that of an entrepreneur. I was at Best Buy in early 2000s during the heyday, and I got a Harvard education in entrepreneurship by actually trying to start businesses within that very large firm. Since I've been at the Carlson School, I've also had the experience of being the chairman of the board of a startup for the last 7 years, which just raised $17 million. Well, I'm the ex-chairman of the board now because we just raised $17 million. So I think I'm here because I have a unique perspective of both entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship from the inside. Oh, I consult too, by the way.
Morning, everyone. My name is Greg Hayes. I'm with the Valspar Corporation. I've been part of Valspar for 20 years in October. I'm still trying to figure out when that happened. Started at a greenfield plant in Bowling Green, Kentucky. So a whole new production facility, whole new manufacturing process, and all new people. So we were just trying to figure out how to make it work. Over the course of my career, been engaged in more and more entrepreneurial activities, I guess is the correct term. developing a greater interest in connecting market needs, perhaps poorly defined market needs, with technology solutions, and then pushing those out into the marketplace. Had a chance to travel internationally and see kind of what customers abroad think and get their different perspectives. And a year and a half ago, I was offered the opportunity to kind of extend from that single segment of the business to an enterprise level. Made the transition to Minneapolis, where I now have a small team of individuals that's really tasked with developing differentiated solutions for Valspar, using both technology we develop in-house or reaching out to outside sources to collaborate through the development of technology, and then working with our marketing team to push those into the marketplace. Have a tremendous interest in understanding market needs and connecting market needs with solutions to bring differentiation to us in the market. Thank you.
I don't know if I should say testing. 1, 2, 3, it's working. So I'm Kim Beyer, and I, for the past 25 years, have been selling intangible services. So anything that you can't touch or feel, I have sold. For the first 10 years of my life, it was in recruitment advertising, and for the last 15 years of my life, it has been in health and wellness. Currently, I am the Global Business Development Manager for Cigna. So I am, as Rick said, I am the cousin from across the pond. My office is in London, but I work virtually because my territory is the world, minus Africa and the Middle East. And I have been working along business owners and C-suite decision makers in my career. For my whole life, I have been an entrepreneur, and it has been in the last 3 or 4 years that the term has actually come about, and I have identified myself as an entrepreneur. It was at a networking event that I met Rick. My friend introduced me as an entrepreneur, and Rick invited me to the panel. So I look forward to sharing with you today.
Keep rotating around this way, but I wanted to read something that Rick shared with me. That is the definition of an entrepreneur, because when I saw the subject come out, I wasn't quite sure what that was. I had an idea, but by Rick's definition, an entrepreneur is someone within a large company that takes risks in an effort to solve a given problem. And our panelists are going to give us their perspectives from within their organization. So with that being said, our first layup question is how does your organization view and treat the subject of entrepreneurship? And Toby, we're going to start with you, and then we'll kind of go from left to right.
Entrepreneurship is a term that's been actually around for about 30 years. A guy named Gifford Pinchot came up with it first, but it was never really studied. So right now, the layup answer is entrepreneurship is a subset of entrepreneurship. That entrepreneurship is not relegated just to startups, but it's relegating to driving value by creating new businesses, whether you're within a startup, within a social organization, or a mission-driven organization, or you're a division of a large corporate entity.
Okay, so entrepreneurship is not something that I would say is strictly defined within the company I operate within. It tends to operate in pockets. It's something that we attempt to foster. And in fact, right now we're in the process of setting up an innovation network across businesses, because we are a global company and we're distributed around the world. And that in and of itself presents a very unique challenge. But entrepreneurship is it's something that's there's not a solid definition to it, right? It's something that everybody knows that they want to happen, but figuring out the right mix of ingredients to get it to take place is a challenge.
And I would add to entrepreneurship as really being a personal choice within your own career development to be on the edge of taking a risk, but letting that entrepreneur take the actual financial risk. So I've always rode alongside business owners. I've created my position within Cigna Corporation. I have come into organizations with confidence, with what I know, and have been willing to explore other areas that I don't know. And so I've come in to ask a lot of questions with concern and interest. Also, been in an environment where I've also been very empowered. And I think empowerment is a very helpful way to instill upon yourself a choice of being an entrepreneur and actually gathering with others that are entrepreneurs, because they have ideas, they're willing to share, and they take a minimal risk. It's the getting tongue-tied. It is the entrepreneur that takes that actual financial risk.
So, like I said, we have about 8 to 9 entrepreneurs at any given time that are full-time. So I can't speak eloquently about how the organization views them. So I'll tell you from my viewpoint. What I think is interesting about entrepreneurship is the likelihood that you'll have to cash out your 401k to get product market fit is pretty low, which is nice, right? So that de-risks it for you to take some chances that you may not take in the outside world. The other piece is in what I've seen, and it is perfect timing, because I had this conversation this morning. They asked me, what do they have in common? Like, we have 8 or 9 people. Where did they come from? Some we recruited internally, some we recruited externally. The thing that they had in common, in my perspective, was they're highly competitive people and they don't like to lose. The other piece is that you have to, because you can't become, most of these concepts will fail. Let's just be honest. I don't know what the percentage is these days. If you're lucky, you get, 10% of the concepts to product market fit? I mean, there's a ton of failure. You have to emotionally detach from this stuff. Because, you're surrounded by mistakes every single day, right? And it's like walking through quicksand. So there's that balance, right? You can't take it home. It's a little bit different than being an entrepreneur on the outside. So that's kind of my viewpoint.
I think we're off to a good start. Greg, you're going to start with this question. Although I want to come back to what Paul just said about cashing out your 401k. I've had people come up to tell me that people who are intrapreneurial, don't have to worry about finance. As you go through the advantages of entrepreneurship, would you kind of address that issue and put that to bed so that people don't acknowledge that really exists? Our question here, and we're going to start with Greg again, is what are the benefits of being an intrapreneur and trying to do entrepreneurial things inside of a larger company?
Well, so the biggest benefit is, which in some ways is also a challenge, is you do have resources available to you. Assuming that you can find people within the organization to support the endeavor, the resources are there. You'll have to spend a tremendous amount of time, effort, and energy on a personal side to pull those resources together quite frequently, unless you are within a team that is tasked with that very, very that purpose. Even then, pulling those resources together can be a challenge. But having the resources available at all is, as you said, it de-risks it, right? So I would say that's one of the biggest advantages.
And then to add to that is really to have those individuals within the organization that may collaborate as a team. I'm solo. I'm the solo entrepreneur at Cigna's Global Wellness Footprint. So I am working with my 37,000 colleagues in a growth mind state. And so we are trained and we go through daily exercises of looking at growth. What have I done today to improve upon what I did yesterday? How can I simplify the solution to the process? How can I come up with a way to be more collaborative and to have things be more time efficient? And so it is the mental focus continually to have that entrepreneurial mind state, and it's very much growth focused.
Could you repeat the question so I can?
What are the benefits of being an entrepreneur and trying to do entrepreneurial things inside your organization?
Yeah, so Yeah, I mean, connections, obviously. I mean, so one of the values, again, just from my own network, I think I've had a unique experience of being an entrepreneur and seeing what entrepreneurs have. I think that network effect of opportunities and those collaboration pieces, I think our team is unique from an operations standpoint. So really quickly, I'll explain. We have a full stack design and development team as well as marketing communications. Is very different. So if I wanted to go out and hire an agency to do this stuff for me, they may not be prepared to work with the uncertainty that we deal with every single day and the amount of change. Actually, we move at such a rapid pace in the experiments that we run that they have a hard time keeping up unless they're in the office with us, right? So there are, I think there's opportunities for that network and those collaborations, but also I think there's some interesting learnings that we've developed by having that internal team and resource team that's very highly focused on this early stage learning and understanding, which is much different than growth and scale. And those competencies are much different.
Having been on a panel in here in the same room last week, I know that you guys are sitting there, and every time somebody says something, you think of something new that you wish you would have said. So we're going to kind of go around that corner and say the first question was about benefits. Let's talk about challenges. Let's talk about what are the negatives to what you're doing and how you overcome that. But maybe you can complement that. Obviously, you're all long-term in doing what you're doing. You must love it to some extent. So let's have that love-hate relationship here and talk about the challenges of your roles. And I think, Kim, I think you're going to end up with the first shot this time.
So the biggest challenges is to not trust yourself. We all have ideas. We all have fear. And I think one of the biggest takeaways would be to embrace your fear. Don't let that be a roadblock for an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur.
We have a term for it. It's called corporate antibodies. So let's just be honest. I mean, in any large corporation, risk, is hard to stomach. There are so many impacts, like factors, and we call them antibodies. There are things like heavy governance, legal, oversight, things of that nature that are trying to literally remove or kill you out of the organization because of the risk of the things that you're trying to do. Our process and the way we've developed it is to try to mitigate that risk as much as possible. So, trying to, again, survive and thrive within a large organization which is not set up to really accept the fact that you're there is an ongoing challenge and kind of an interesting dance that you kind of take on and accept.
I think to pile on that point, I still can. One of the things I meant to say is I still consult, so I get a chance to practice this still. And I asked one of my mentors, who's been doing this a long time, what's the biggest problem with corporate innovation or entrepreneurship? What's the biggest challenge? He goes, well, organizations can't get out of their own way. So look at it like if you're an entrepreneur within that organization and you're not taking a financial risk, but you're taking a career risk, you're taking a trade-offs risk, you're taking a risk of being associated because it's a failure. You can tell the CEO of the company, say, yeah, we're going to fail, but we're going to learn from it. And they're like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, that's great, but what's this fail part of it? So when you go into the boss and say, I failed like crazy, but man, we're getting smart, you're exhibiting some career risk. And the fact is it hasn't been studied, but from personal experience or the few studies that have been done, these organizations, innovation, because I'm really talking about, it's an innovation organization within large organizations last for 3 to 4 years on average. Then they go away for 3 to 4 years on average, and they come back because the execs always want it, but they don't generally have the patience to let it play out because it's not a quarterly earnings game, right? So one of the things, you can be displaced pretty easily. I mean, I got fired a couple times at Best Buy managed to hang on, but because what happened to the what happened to the entrepreneurs? They're gone. Okay, we're putting our money towards something else. So I think that's, and everything that comes with it, square peg, round hole, different culture of entrepreneurship is different than entrepreneurship, which is different than daily corporate life. So I would say that it's all kind of packaged up in that. And then there's a bunch of other risks that are just right underneath it.
So I can pile on even more. If you read Creativity Inc., I think it's Ed Catmull, he writes about the beast and the ugly baby. I was having a conversation with a few folks in the room about this before we sat down. Right, so in large organizations, you became a large organization because you were successful doing something, right? Whatever that something might be. And part of that success is efficiency, right? It's efficiency, it's weeding out waste, it's making things, stronger, better, faster, however you want to look at it. And then you have this ugly baby, right? As you said, it's square peg, round hole. It's this kind of half-formed idea, and it doesn't really fit. And the beast, this massive entity it's been successful, so it must be more successful. It looks at that and says, well, that doesn't fit, right? It's going to make me less efficient, right? It's a different product line. And then oftentimes even, to those who use the design process, you probably heard the term voice of the customer, right? So, you go to your sales team perhaps and you might say, well, what's the voice of the customer? And they'll say, well, this is the voice of the customer. And it's not really what the customer says, it's what we internally think the customer would say, right? So that presents that whole series of things. They present a challenge to pushing this newly formed idea out into the wild. So balancing, when you begin to show the beast, the ugly baby, versus holding it back and kind of nurturing it is a real challenge.
Am I correct in saying that we're not asking you to tell case studies or stories that are out of pocket? I suspect all four of you could share things with us that shouldn't be shared, but if the floor wishes to ask those questions, you can certainly... Okay, hang on, I'm coming. I'm not moving that bad for an old guy. Yeah, I know. We're trying not to...
Thank you. How do the four of you play with your merger and acquisition groups or your post-merger acquisition groups? I would think entrepreneurs each almost be a double agent with the intrapreneurs, or vice versa.
That was the play nice question.
So I'll start.
Go for it.
I don't know who follows the press and who knows of large healthcare mergers and acquisitions, but as I said, I work for Cigna Corporation, and so as you all are aware, there will be a combination in 2017, 2018 with Cigna and Anthem. So I am involved in reading about 4 and 5 inch proxies and sharing my opinion on collaborative business partners. And I am just the opinion that gets rolled up to the legal entities and the financial entities and the boards. So I check boxes on many of those documents.
I think one of the things that, at least from a position that mergers and acquisitions and entrepreneurship or innovation are two separate but can be related things, because if you take the simple thing is one way you're growing your growth, the other way you're buying your growth. And the failure rates in mergers and acquisitions is almost as astounding as new product development. I think there's a case to be made so entrepreneurs are usually not involved in the decisions of mergers and acquisitions because they're completely different, just like they're not in corporate venture capital usually, but they may be the team that takes, especially a nascent company or a startup, and works to develop that into a standalone business. So I think they're not interchangeable, but there's some related activities.
So it's more to do with, you're the parents of the spin-off.
Right. When you're evaluating a merger and acquisition, there's it's mostly financial metrics, and then there's some assumed synergy that's going to come out of it after you get through, organizational fit, whether it's, do our systems work and do our people work, and frankly, people don't spend enough time on that, I think. But very rarely will you throw an entrepreneur into a new acquisition, unless again it's just a baby startup. Then they may put an entrepreneur to say, okay, we're gonna develop this together. It might be more resource augmentation than anything.
Okay. Yeah, just to add on to that, I mean, I think, we watch some of the M&R that happens just out of curiosity to see, is this fit within the broader spectrum of what we think is the plan, right? Or could we develop something to complement that? But the reality is that, and I've watched a few different mergers and acquisitions, and then trying to integrate with the enterprise. I mean, it's like a couple year long process, and then ultimately, and I think everybody's seen the same walk, the people that develop that, are out after their non-compete is done, right? A couple years later, and you're left with, hopefully something decent. But I think in terms of the portfolio and seeing, what is the company interested in? How can we help, or how can we complement some of those acquisitions? I think it's something we pay attention to.
I think so. I don't know what your all's perspective is, but I was actually part of an acquired company, and it was an acquisition of near equals. And you touched on the role of culture, right? And even when you think there's a good business fit, and maybe the systems will come close, and maybe even the product lines are fairly close, right? Because that's a lot of what most of the mergers I've seen, at least. It's not really we're buying a new piece of technology to nurture it and bring it to fruition. It's, hey, we have, we're gonna take out a competitor and merge our resources so we can become even a bigger beast, right? But even if all of the metrics seem to fit, kind of the culture that exists is a real challenge, getting that right. And once you get through all of that, and that can take decades to really work its way through the system if you're in a mature industry, at least that's been my experience, right? Then you kind of go in and you look for the nuggets that maybe you could build off of and pull in and push them into a market space that nobody's thought of. But that's been my own personal experience with it.
I'll just add a little time perspective on that, because today I just came out of a big corporate meeting, and the division that I work for was acquired by Cigna in 2006, and the legal entity and all of the acquisition documents were final this morning, and it's 2016.
I would dare say, Rick, that if we ever want to do another deal on something along these lines, we may want to do something on integration, because I suspect you guys all have stories that you can tell that under that guise, otherwise we're too far afield today.
Just quickly to add into that, I think one of the rules, it's a kind of unspoken principle. We, as entrepreneurs, work with looking at customers and developing that early customer base, early adopter base. We typically avoid larger companies just because of the time that's required to iron out those deals in the B2B space. We usually go for smaller size entities that are more in a underdog, portion of that category, just because they're more willing to compromise and flex and move faster along with us than a larger entity as well.
The startup I was at, we had it started as maybe a minor purchase, but it turned into a strategic relationship with a Fortune 500 company, and it took us 2.5 years to do a deal, and the deal almost killed us. I mean, we almost went broke 10 times waiting for the deal to happen, and they were moving as fast as they could. So that's one of the big companies and startups. There's a lot of things that can go really, really bad. And most of it's around the weight of the big company will just crush the small company. And that's actually a quote from Michael Moritz from Sequoia Capital. I asked why big companies and small companies don't do it, because big companies crush small companies with the weight of their expectations and their process and their bureaucracy.
So I can say the consensus of our group is that there are lots of opportunities and lots of challenges. And the challenges might be more interesting. I saw a question out there. Paul, we're going to get to your question. That's the next one.
Creative. Hi, I've been in an organization that was acquired a number of times and eventually died from a bad reaction to corporate antibodies. So here's my question. What is a tip from each of you to really help foster and inspire that entrepreneurship not being a scary, terrible thing, but being something that can actually make a positive difference to the organization?
So maybe I'll take a crack at it. So the big thing is find people that are like-minded within the organization. No matter, in every organization, however large or small, there are people that share a similar mindset. Right? They'll have different perspectives, different backgrounds, and we talked about being in a large organization. What are the advantages? One of the advantages is if you're in an organization of 5, 10, 15, 20,000 people, right? The backgrounds are so diverse, and reaching out and building the network internally and building relationships with those people, that will give you a tremendous amount of support and empower you to move forward with your own ideas.
Side by side with that, it used to be like in the late 1990s and early 2000s that these innovation efforts were paraded out in front of both the press and internal organization, and I was on stage at Best Buy in front of every executive and the board of directors at an offsite. The pressure on you and your small organization to save the company or do whatever they're promising you're going to do, and the things that have changed is you see a lot of successful efforts that are really, really grassroots and organic. So they start with finding like-minded people. They start with having an internal advocate, maybe not the CEO, and you start in the business unit and you stay a little bit under the radar until you have some results you might be able to communicate. We've sold this, we've hit these milestones. It's usually not sales, but it's usually some sort of milestones, at least prove there was some value. That would be under the radar.
And I have a few things to add to that with regards to just personally choosing to be collaborative. I mean, everybody has work colleagues that you like and those that probably aren't going to get the Valentine's candy. But with every effort in a work environment, small or large, to try to give more than you take. So the willingness of sharing the ideas and being proactive and taking on the extra workloads and sometimes working those odd hours. I'm a testament to that. When I have meetings in India, I have to readjust my whole life schedule because it's 16 hours, well, with daylight savings, sometimes 15, 16 hours ahead of us. So just being in that collaborative nature and really showing appreciation. Every time there's a project, I mean, even signatures on your statement to have something with appreciation so that you're sort of the go-to person in a large or small work environment, and really try to position yourself as an ambassador of the company so that your professional life and your personal life are really mirrored. I work for a healthcare organization, so I have to walk the walk and talk the talk.
Real quickly, I'll share a quick story. We have a corporate intranet. Front page of the intranet has news and updates of things that are going on around the company. We had published a video that was done to profile one of the startups and the entrepreneurs that we had on that project. It was a great project. They went through the process, and ultimately, I think the end concept, was close, very close to product market fit. It had some challenges. But that profile of that individual, was cast around the rest of the organization. He told me that he received dozens and dozens and dozens of emails from people he has never met, probably never will meet inside the organization, telling him how happy they were to see that the organization is willing to do these types of things. And I think the easiest thing that happens to us is you take it for granted. You're given this opportunity to try to do something amazing with it, whether it's window dressing or anything else. You're given this opportunity, and there's pressure with it, sometimes greater, sometimes smaller, but it's easy to take that for granted that there are other people within the organization that will never get that opportunity. So take that time and that opportunity and do the best you can with it.
Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left.
Wow.
Paul, you're going to get to go first because you threw this question at those of us that are up here about what is the intrapreneur's kryptonite. So I'd like you to kind of comment on that, and then each of you get about a minute to kind of any final thoughts that you have, given the perspective that we could have done this for 8 hours and not just for 45 minutes. But Paul, if you go first, then we can kind of come this way.
Sure. No. So my perspective on the kryptonite. So what's the biggest challenge I think our entrepreneurs have, and that is they forget to talk to their customer base. And it's easy to sit behind a dashboard and look at quantitative metrics all day, and they forget to be close to and talk to and get quantitative feedback from their customer base. That informs the product features, service features, and everything moving forward. And so if they continue to keep that relationship and have that conversation, asking the right questions with their customer base, I think that more often than not, they will succeed in finding out whether that product or service has got legs or not faster.
I'm going to pile on again. That is, if you look at an innovation process like the good old-fashioned ones before there was lean entrepreneurship and design thinking and all the other ones, there is one common thread, and that is the fact that you have to figure out you have to solve a real problem for real people. So to Paul's point, you have to figure out what motivates human beings, what problems they have, what pains, gains, and then provide a unique and compelling solution. And a lot of the problem, I think, is that's really easy to understand. I mean, this isn't super complex. It's complicated because people have a tendency to move straight to the solution. Executives have pet ideas, engineers build beautiful machines, coders write beautiful code, and a lot of this stuff is done without any customer input at all. It's a N of one, okay? So that is where you see a lot of the failure. One of our local, a very large local company asked me to present on why things failed, and it's a complex answer, but there's been some studies done on post-startup failures, like essay-based ones, and they use new technology to drive the real reason. And a lot of it's because they're offering products that no one really gives a rat's ass about. I mean, really, if you come down to it, it's a little more complicated, but that's there's no value proposition. You're not solving a problem. I don't care. I shouldn't change. So anyway, I could talk about that for longer.
Well, I'll pile on more. I'm a trained scientist, right? I'm a chemist by training, and a lot of thoughts about engineering and that kind of thing. And when that's your background, right? You want to give something perfect to your customer, right? You want to nurture it in the lab, right? This baby that we said you want it to come out, and when you show it to the customer, you're going to go yes, and we're going to sell millions and millions of dollars worth today, right? That's not how it happens, right? Because what typically occurs, the way this cycle happens is when you do it that way, is you get it out to the customer and they go, that's not what I wanted, right? And the voice of ourselves, right, not the voice of the customer, they say what the customer wants, right? Really, if you have an idea and you think this might be something the customer's interested in, show it to them, right? Show it to them very early, because if you don't, and talking about design thinking, so I had the opportunity to attend a class at Stanford, and they said this, you get attached to the ugly baby, right? And after I've had it for weeks or months, I don't want to let it go, right? And don't you dare call my baby ugly, right? Don't do that, right? But if it's very, very early, you show it to them, they go, it's not quite right. Maybe you could tweak this, adjust that. Then the customer's telling you what they want. So then it becomes an iterative process between you and the people that are actually going to be using the product.
And I guess it's last but not least, So I think the only thing that can be ugly is change, but yet the only thing that is constant is change. So the best thing to do is to set yourself up for that success every day. I actually start my day, as I'm sure many of you have, with ways of setting yourself up for success. And so I tell myself a daily positive affirmation that I believe something wonderful will happen to me today. And all day, I look for that one wonderful thing that's going to happen to me that day. And it's a way for me to break through the fears when I'm with the CMOs and in difficult, challenging situations, to stay in that entrepreneurial mind state and to continue to be the individual ideations that I have that position the success in my career and for my company.
Thanks, Kim. Let's thank Kim and Greg and Toby and Paul for being with us today. That was a lot of stuff.